All right, welcome back to our second podcast for Pistol. In the studio or den or briefing room, whatever you want to call it. I'm Manny Angulo, one of the co-founders of Pistol. On today's podcast, we have sitting to my right, T. We have to leave that just for the time being.
Hey, everybody.
She'll be joining us quite often. To my left is a wonderful guest coming straight out of the mean streets of Gilbert. You might know him from his gang name.
Did you just say the mean streets of Gilbert?
mean streets of Gilbert.
Lord.
His rap name or his moniker, if you will, Mr. Granguito, right?
Yeah.
Is that what you're out of, Gilbert, when you're patrolling the mean streets out there?
I don't think that's what they called me, but
Okay.
that's where I was. That's where I served.
The mean streets. Come on.
They could get
There's
rough
gotta
there.
be something better than that.
They could get rough. If they bordered Mesa, that was the worst place to be because it all
They got
spilled
all the people
over.
you dropped off. That's
Yeah. If they had
that's
warrants or
what it was.
something, we just kick them over there to Gilbert and be like, pick them up, go commit crime in Gilbert.
Yeah. Because
So-
that's all Gilbert picked up was warrants. They
Yeah.
didn't do anything else.
Or DUIs.
Or DUIs.
That's all they did, DUIs. And
All right, let's focus.
it's all right. Let's get back on schedule. So we're back again. We appreciate you listening to the last podcast. Hopefully you'll keep listening. Today, I guess we're going to go into my story a little bit so that listeners have an opportunity to kind of understand who we are and kind of our background. So real brief on me. I made my bones at Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. I worked lockdown unit in the jails for a couple, 3 years. Got hired with Mesa, went up into patrol, and then went over to the gang unit. Spent several years there. And came back by no choice of mine.
How many? Wait, and how many years are we at? So how long you been PD?
So at the time of my retirement, just about 14.
Okay.
So I did about 4 years on the streets and then went over to our gang unit, Special Investigations Division. Had a grand time there and then ended up back in patrol due to some department politics, if you will. And so part of, and I should preface this before, we're doing this on Veterans Day. So shout out to brothers and sisters and vets and everything like that.
Yep.
Thank you for your service.
I don't know if it's just me, but I kind of liken police and the vets to like the vets being rock stars and police being movie stars. We want to be rock stars. They want to be movie stars. Every time I see a vet, they want to be a cop. Every cop sometimes want to be a vet. So I give them a lot of shit about that stuff. Plus, we have that same 4 letters in common on occasion. So back to me. I go back to patrol somewhere around 2012, somewhere around that time. And I'll be a little bit vague because I want to be respectful of the victim, at least in my case, the mom. And plus, I have an NDA part of when I settled with the city. I have an NDA, so I can't go too far into it.
Do you want to?
What's that?
Not use jargon and say a non-disclosure.
Non-disclosure agreement. All right. Sorry, lawyer.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm sitting there going, I don't know what that was.
And the other part that we have to talk about that I guess maybe lawyers talked about is if you're listening to the podcast, we use foul language on occasion.
Oh, yeah. We could be offensive.
We could be very offensive. So
You
turn
might
off
get
the
triggered.
podcast. You might get triggered. That's the other thing. And you can always reach out to us and we'll provide all that information at the end of the podcast. So back to me. So the middle of the year of 2012, I'm working patrol, and there's a drowning, which in Arizona happens all the time. There's 2 or 3 a day, sometimes in the city. In the state, there could be 5 or 6, and it varies from kids to adults. And to mine, it was a child. Surprisingly enough, the child wasn't my issue. It wasn't what caused my damage or my PTSD, what have you. It was the mom that was screaming. So while my partner was working the baby, who subsequently died, I was in charge of mom. And like I think probably most departments, primary has the scene, and then you have secondary officers, and my responsibility was mom.
Right.
So mom was running around screaming, as you can imagine. And basically I take control of mom. She's bought and paid for by me. they want to put her in the ambulance, or I wanted to, and the ambulance, the paramedics just didn't want to take her. She was just a mess.
Because she was screaming.
Because she was screaming, they couldn't focus.
Yeah.
So I put her in the back of my cruiser, and in my cruiser, it has the bars on the window and the plexiglass, just like it's not divided so that it's just all plexiglass. So it's not like some where there's a cage and you can talk, but it's just all plexiglass. So she's banging on there on the way to the hospital, screaming. She was screaming so much so that I remember my sergeant asking me to give him a call, but I had picked up the microphone and he said, "You need to call me," because he couldn't hear amongst the screaming. And anyways, we're headed to the hospital, and she's in the back of the car screaming, kicking, calling me baby killer and names, and I just wanted her really to shut up. And I had been around in gangs, we had been around a lot of screaming, but for some reason this was just a different pitch. It was a different tone. I will tell you that she was a single mom, so it was just her and her child at the time. So I kind of understood that was her world at that time. There wasn't anything else. So we get to the hospital, and they take us to the quiet room, and everybody here knows, whether you're PD or fire, it doesn't matter. If you've been to the quiet room, nothing good comes out of that room.
Right.
They're taking there for a reason. She knew that. I knew that. But I think she was still hopeful. So we get to the quiet room, and I got her calmed down. I can see my partner, who's down the hall with the baby. And I can't really tell at the time. But looking back, I'm pretty sure he knew the end result wasn't good. So they bring in clergy, they bring in social services to work with mom. But she starts screaming and crying as they're talking to her. And ultimately, they're in there maybe a top 8 minutes tops for both of them. And then they walk out. And they leave her on the floor, screaming, crying. And I'm thinking in my mind, like, where are you going?
Well, they walk out because she's screaming, or what? I don't understand.
I have no idea. To this day, I have no idea.
I don't understand. Isn't that their job, to console and to be there in the hospital? Like, what are these people thinking?
I don't know. I mean, social services goes in with their little computer asking primary questions, about insurance and whatnot.
Yeah, that's all they care about is insurance.
Right. And as far as clergy, I thought they'd stay there the whole time.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. But the nun didn't stay in very long. And
was this all before the notification?
Yeah, this was all before. And so clearly we're separated from everyone else, and it's just the two of us in there. So I get her situated again, so she's calm, sitting, and we're waiting. So I step outside of the room, and I'm just trying to catch my breath and get my bearings. And I look down the hallway, and I can see the doctor, and he's walking towards me. And I can see in his face what he wants. I mean, I know the baby's gone, but I know what he wants of me, right? He wants me to deliver the death notification because he doesn't want to do it. So I think we've all delivered them before. I've done it on the phone. Unfortunately, I've done it in person. And there's not really an easy way to do that.
No, nobody wants to do that. But that's your job.
Right. Well, in this time, I was in his world. And I looked at the doctor. I was like, no. You don't get off that easy. And he looks at me kind of weird. And I'm like, I'm not going to do it. And at that point, I think we kind of both professionally understood that it was the death notification coming. And he didn't want to do it. And he was pissed that I basically said no to him. So he goes in and he delivers the death notification as brisk and as fast as he can, which sets the mom off again. And then the doctor comes out, looks at me, and kicks me in the balls and says, now you can take her to see her kid.
Oh my gosh.
And so, and here I am processing in my mind, like, how did I end up doing, like, you have people here at the hospital that are paid to do this, right? Like, where are these people that are going to take this mom to go see their dead baby? And it may sound callous, and I hope you understand it's not, but when somebody drowns, it's not graphic. Right? They look like they're sleeping.
Right.
Yep.
So in some respects, you can almost trick yourself into believing that they're just sleeping. And that's probably not the best way if you talk to a doctor to compartmentalize that. Because you're not accepting the death. But I mean, for us, and at least for me, I just thought it's peaceful. I've seen some pretty graphic scenes where things are not as peaceful. But I still didn't want to take her down to see that because I knew the end result was going to be more crying and more screaming.
Yeah.
So she heard him say that. I don't know if she really acknowledged or paid attention to what that meant, but I knew I had to take her.
And she's still screaming now?
Well, now she's been told, so now she's upset all over again, and now she's upset for a whole different reason. When she was screaming before, it was because my partner was doing CPR and it didn't look good.
Yeah.
But now she knows it's the end all be all at this point. So now the screams are just that much more cranked up to another notch.
Yeah.
And so I take my breath and I go through.
You do what you have to do.
Right. Yeah. So I go down and I'm walking her down the hallway, and I can see my partner. He's Marine, 20 years. He had on the department many years as a Marine, solid dude. He was upset. And we get there, and if you can imagine in the emergency room where all that shit goes flying, taking out needles, and they throw everything on the floor, and
all the wrappers, all the clothing. And so now I've got this dead naked baby, pseudo, because they got him somewhat covered. And they didn't clean up the room before?
No, they were in the process of doing that when I come around the corner. And as that happens, then everything stops in the ER. So the nurses and the doctors and the MAs or whatever they are, they stop and they just leave. They just walk out. Like, they don't even finish what they're doing. They don't even want to be in the room at that point.
Well, they can't continue what they're doing. I get that. They can't keep cleaning up while the mom's now seeing
They
the
want to
baby.
be a little bit respectful.
Right.
Allow the grievance, grieving.
Looking back, that all makes sense. But at the time, I really didn't want to be in that room.
Well, yeah, because they're leaving you. You can't just walk away.
Right. And I was like, anybody else going to sit here and help me with this, Mom? So,
well, up until that point, everyone has left you. So you showed up, doctor left you, the clergy left you, the counselors left you.
Right. So now I've got, there was probably about 3 or 4 people in there cleaning up. I don't even think the doctor was in at that time. So now we got to go over to the gurney where the baby's at, and now she's got to go pay her respects, which there is no easy way to put that other than, now I'm holding up this mom who's screaming over her baby for them to come back. And they're not coming back. Yeah. And there's nothing you can say to that mom. You can't say it's okay, or no. And I could never really say he's in a better place because she's not in a good place. That doesn't make any sense. So I kind of just I'm there just to kind of hold her up, I guess, because nobody else was there to hold her up. It was just me.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna lie. I would have given anything to walk out of that room just as much as those doctors would have. But I guess they beat me to the punch. And I wasn't going to let her not have that time. And she was on my gun side, which I never let happen ever. And just this one and only time I had to hold her up because she was going to collapse. I could tell she was going to collapse.
Physically, right.
And so I tried to give her as much time as possible. And there's not really a good amount of time you could give somebody because they don't want to walk away from that. But as much as I could tolerate, I let her stay. And, for me, it was an eternity. And even now, she's not there screaming, but she's in my head screaming. Yeah. So, I gave her time. She paid her respects. It was probably about 10 minutes. It may have been less, but in my mind, it was far longer than it should have been for me. And so we go back, put her back in the room, and then we go through the proper procedures. I'm waiting for homicide to show up because any death, homicide shows up, or they at least get the call. Right. There wasn't anything negligent or anything. It was just an accident in the summer. So going through that, it was, I knew I shouldn't have probably been there as long as I was. I think all said and done, I was with her for about 2 hours from start to finish, from the scene to the drive to the pain, seeing the baby, and then putting her back until the family members could get there. And all I really wanted to do was get out of the hospital at that point. I just needed air. And it's weird because in the hospital, I think to myself, it was so hard to fucking breathe in that hospital. There's plenty of air in the hospital. Yeah. But in my mind, I couldn't breathe and I needed to get outside. And I never experienced that before in my career. I'd never experienced not feeling like I need enough air. And so I ended up going back to getting her back, and then homicide shows up, and I leave. That's the end of my tenure time with the. I got to go write the report, right? I got to cut my part of the report. So I drive over to my beat area, and I start typing the supplemental report on my actions from that. And I realize that I still hear her screaming. And I remember thinking in the car that this just must be like a concert kind of thing, where you go to a concert and your ears are muffled for a little while and then it'll go away.
Right.
But it was really, it was aggravating. It was agitating. You know, I was trying to type, and I think my wife has since pulled that report, and a couple of the other officers that had helped said, yeah, when you read the report, it's weird. It's a weird way you wrote. But I could hear it. So my sergeant pulls up, and he's checking on everybody as they do. And he asked if I'm all right. And I said, yeah. I didn't tell him that I could still hear the screaming. But I said I was okay.
Because you think it's going to stop. Because you think it's going to go away. You're not going to, you're not going to.
You always put your best face on and say, yeah, I'm good. Whether you are or not. That's just that's how we're raised as police officers, to put your game face on and, yeah, I'm good. Yeah. Whether you are or you're not.
Right.
At the time, I didn't know that I wasn't good. I just figured it was part of the call and it would go away. It's kind of like the smell of death. You know, you smell that forever, and then it goes, and you're like, God, I hope this gets out of my nostrils sometime soon.
Yes.
But it didn't. So I stuck around. I wrote my supplement. I took a couple more calls, and about 10 o'clock that night, I'm thinking I should probably call it early. And as I start heading to the station, another fucking hot tone comes out, and it's another drowning. And I'm like, yeah, don't think I need to go to that, right? Like,
yeah.
And the comments on the call were that it was like a 55-year-old man who had been drinking, and I was like, he lived.
Yeah.
I'll let the grave guys get a hold of it or whatever. But and part of me, again, we're doers. I think everyone in the room here is doers, and probably the people who are listening are doers. And you want to go to the next one, right? But I knew, I was like, no, I'm good. I'm just gonna go change out and head home. So my sergeant was kind enough to let me break off a little early, and I got in the car, drove home, and I could still hear him, and it was fucking with me a lot. So by this time, it's almost midnight, and I get to the house, and it's quiet. Being caught for that long, your family's asleep. They don't really pay much attention, so they're nice and cozy, and I can't go straight to sleep now because it's quiet in the house. I'm hearing the screams in my head, and I'm thinking, how am I going to go to sleep?
Yeah.
And I can't, so I can't turn on the TV because my wife's asleep, and I can't sit in the living room because they're going to hit the TV and wonder why they're out. And so I did, and I wasn't much of a drinker before this. So I thought, maybe if I just have some whiskey, it'll calm me down, take the edge off. And so I took some whiskey, and it didn't work at all. And so in my brilliant mind, I did the next best thing. And I tried gin because, well, why stop at whiskey?
Why stop there?
Why not get fully intoxicated, try to go sleep? And I think that was probably my first fatal mistake when it came to my PTSD, was because that probably more likely than not locked in a lot of the issues that I had. After that, I tried to lay down and go to sleep, and I couldn't. I tossed and turned. Got up and pretended like nothing was a problem the next day.
Was that something that one of your doctors told you? Was that because you used alcohol that it did lock it in? Were you ever told that?
Yeah, I think one of the doctors said it pretty much solidified the fact that, and I don't remember if it was one of the IMEs or what, but they said that probably wasn't the best thing to do for my mental health at the time. And
IME is independent medical examination.
We'll defer to Brian when it comes to.
I'll translate all the jargon.
Any of the jargon, the alphabet soup that we use. So the next day I get up and I talk to my wife, and we've been doing this dance for a minute. I mean, I got up, I'm home, I'm safe, and question comes out of her mouth, "How was your shift?" And I said, "Fine." Fine for me meant no officers were killed and nobody's hurt, and it didn't make any mention of the drowning. And got ready for my shift again, and started driving in to work. And I get a call from Internal Affairs, our buddies. Then they're dropping a notice of investigation,
oh, yeah.
an NOI on me for for a hit that had been placed on my life. Well, now I couldn't figure out why that would have been my investigation if I'm the victim, but they were dropping the investigation on me anyways. And I remember very clearly at that point, when that happened, I remember something snapping. And I told all of my doctors at the time, at that moment, something snapped, and it was done. And so I got to the station, and when I got to the station, my boss looks at me and he's like, "Dude, you look like shit. You haven't slept." And I'm like, "No, I haven't slept at all." And I'm like, "Look, I can't go on the streets, right? You put me on the streets, I'm taking my gun out and I'm gonna pop the first banger I see." And he's like, You got to go to the office. And I said, "That's a good idea."
Yeah.
Right. So, but what I had done, just to backtrack a little bit, was after I got the call from Internal Affairs, because I told him, "You can talk to my attorney." And then I called Nate, who was a very good friend of mine from the gang unit. And I told him something was wrong and I needed to see him. And he had been peer for a while, peer support. And I asked for my other partner. I don't know why. Maybe I just needed something safe or somebody I trusted. So when I made those comments to my sergeant, he's like, "We're going to get you some peer support." And I said, "Well, I've already made the call." So he's like, "I'll drive you." And I'm like, "I'll go." So again, this is just machismo, not wanting to help. Like, I'll take care of it myself. Mm-hmm. So, I get down to just my undershirt and my pants, take off the duty belt. And I head over to the union office and I see my partner, Nate, and I'm a mess. And we have to have him on because I don't remember the interactions at that time. But when I saw my partner, Eddie, that's when I broke down. I lost it and I couldn't control my crying. And I'm like, "You guys need to get these screams out of my head." Because by this time it had been all night into the next day. And then now I'm getting hit with the investigation notice. And it was just, I was done. And I couldn't stop. So
now wait, are you crying when you see Eddie? Do you think you're crying because you're ashamed of that you're having a reaction, or what do you think caused the?
I have no idea. I will tell you that when you work that tightly with people, you gain a certain amount of trust and safety. You feel safe. And when I asked Nate to have both of them meet me, I knew that Eddie had been part of the peer support program. I knew Nate had. And I trusted these guys. Yeah. And I don't know why, but when I figured they could help me. Yeah. We had been through doors together. We had arrested people. We had been fights together. Why wouldn't they be able to help me?
They're going to tell you something magical that's going to make it, they're going to fix it.
Yeah. Right. So, I'm breaking down. They're trying to figure out what's going on. And they're not doctors. They don't know what the hell's going on. So, they get me calmed down. They give me some water. I calm down, and I'm telling them, "Look, you got to get this girl from screaming in my head. It is driving me fucking crazy." So we're cops, and that's what we are. So we come up with these random ideas, like, I think somebody said, like, "We'll just get you a hotel," and I'm like, "Well, what time am I supposed to tell my wife? Like, I just don't come home now because." So they're trying. God bless them. They're trying, but they know that I have to see the doctor, if you will. Right? When you go to peer support, they have a doctor. And Dave talked about that. He was a wedding counselor for him who specialized in, or not wedding, but marriage.
Yeah, marriage counselor.
And so they're calming me down. I don't know how long it took. They get me calmed down, and then I have to drive home. And I have to tell my wife why I'm home. And I don't really know why I'm home other than the screams. Like, I don't grasp in my head what's wrong with me. I'd never been in this position.
Right.
If I twisted my ankle or broke my hand or something, I could tell her I broke my hand, can't go to work.
Yeah.
And this, I couldn't articulate to her what was all I could really say was I had a bad call. I had a bad call. That was it. And so she's spinning up trying to figure out what's going on. I don't know what's going on. So the guys with peer support had scheduled time with me to go see the clinician. And up until this point, the only time that I had any dealings with any kind of department psychologist or whatever was the pre-hire, when you do your psychological evaluation, the MMPI, do you like trees? Why? Shit like that. Like, that was what I had. Yeah. So I do exactly what I'm supposed to do. They schedule it. They call me and they say, "Okay, tomorrow you're going to meet with this person." And I think it's a doctor. And I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to get fixed." Right. Like, and so now I'm, again, back to the machismo thing. My wife's like, "I'll come with you." And I'm like, no, I got this. I'll do it, and then I'll be back at work any day now.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening is I go to this, I don't know what the hell Mesa was thinking, but I go to this chiropractor place where they sell like inserts for shoes.
What?
Yeah, it's like, what are they called? The inserts where the shoes where they mold them to your feet or the.
Did you tell him that was the wrong end?
No, it was the right. It was the right address, right? I mean, I worked in Mesa. I knew the addresses in Mesa.
Orthotics, that's what they're called.
What is it?
Orthotics.
Orthotics, yeah. So I'm standing in front of this orthotics shop, and I'm holding this piece of paper with the address on it, and I'm thinking to myself, I've been here before for the apartment complex behind here, so I know this is the right address, but I don't see a doctor's office here. So now it's fucking with me even more. So now this is when I'm starting to realize I got some anger issues, right? Not on top of hearing these screams. Now I got shit ain't working out right. So I just said, fuck it. Let's go in and see what happens. So I go in and
to the wrong doctor's office.
No, it was the right doctor's. It was right. So this little lady comes out and she's like, "Hi, are you Manny?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Come on back." And I'm like, "My feet don't hurt." I don't know what to tell you. And we go into this. I guess she sublet it like some little office space out of there, and I go into this little room that's half the size of what we're sitting in, which is small, by the way. And I sit down on this couch, and she sits across from me, and she's like, "What's going on?" And I let her have it. Like, I just told her, I'm like, "Look," and I break down, and I'm like, "I don't know what's going on. You need to fix this. I need her to stop screaming. You could just get it to stop screaming, and we'll be good." Like, and she sees me, and she stops me, and she's like, I can't see you. And I was like, "What do you mean you can't see me? Like, this is your job."
What?
And I go, "What do you mean? Like, they sent me here. You're supposed to help me. You work for us. This is where we come." And she says, "You're in no way ready. You need to be medicated," is what she told me. And I go, "What does that mean?" And she's like, "You got to go to your primary. You got to come down. You're
oh my gosh,
beyond all these," whatever terms she used. And I was like, and so I kept calling her doctor, and she corrected me towards the end. She's like, "I'm not a doctor." And I'm like, what the fuck am I here?
Yeah.
Right? Like, why am I here right now if you're not a doctor? What are you? She had a bunch of letters after her name, or counselor, or whatever letters come after counselors. And she tried. I mean, I'm not going to say she wasn't. She helped. But she said I needed to be medicated, and that didn't help because now I have to come home, tell my wife that I need to get medicated, go see my primary to tell him I need medication for something I know nothing about.
Oh my gosh.
So I go the next day, go to my doctor, and that didn't go very well because I'm a mess, right? I'm just a mess at that point. I'm shaking, I'm trembling, I'm hypervigilant at that point, and I don't want to leave the house. I don't know what's going on.
Was it loud other than the screaming? Like,
that's all I heard.
Was everything? That's all you
that's
could
all
hear
I
was
heard.
screaming?
That's all. Even to this day, if I'm in a quiet room, it's over. I have to hear ambient noise. But I go to my doctor's office. She gives me Xanax. Now, she calls it in from the office. Now, her office is, I'm not lying to you, her office is directly across the street from Target, where I fill my prescriptions. Oh. So she calls it in and she says it'll be ready in about 20 minutes. I'm like, okay, well, I can't leave. What I should say is I couldn't leave the house without my headphones at that point.
Uh-oh.
So I had so I look like Warren from Something About Mary, so I'm walking around. My wife's got this.
See my baseball.
Exactly. So my wife's walking around with this fully grown 5-year-old with his headphones on, and we go to Target and I'm trying to get this, and I hope this makes sense to some of you, but even seeing things were loud. Does that make sense? So like if I saw somebody in front of me, it was like they projected just this freaking loud vibe. Like I didn't want them near me.
I understand that because everything for me was loud. Like I couldn't go anywhere because the noise was so overwhelming. It seemed like everything had the volume turned up, and then I had this high-pitched noise inside my ears, and I had to have it completely quiet. Like I couldn't go anywhere,
right? Because
I needed quiet. But you're just the opposite.
I'm the opposite. I couldn't be in quiet. There's no way. I mean, I was, just to give you an idea, like I like all kinds of music. I was listening to Rammstein, bro. Like, you ever listen to Rammstein? They're angry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're hitting those drums really hard.
It must be a Mexican.
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
Ramstein. I don't know how you'd say that in Mexican.
I got nothing.
Yeah, Ramstein is definitely. That's more Nazi kind of stuff where you're.
It's like death metal.
It's like
type
death
stuff.
metal.
Yeah.
Like I needed to hear that because everything was so overpowering to me at that point. You know, colors were loud, people were loud, sound. I mean, everything, and so that started me down the path of medication, and I asked. You know, I went and got my information filled out for work comp, and that's a whole different story. We'll talk about another time, but from that point on, it just became a mess. You know, I mean, I was just a ball of anger. I tried to go back to work at my worst, which ultimately solidified my retirement. A lieutenant had asked me to do something. Now, I should preface this with, it wasn't the lieutenant's idea, but what happened was some cool F&G detective. Oh, fucking new guy. Sorry, Brian.
Yeah, all right.
So
I was just waiting for you to breathe this so I could spell it out for you guys.
Right. So this new undercover detective is on surveillance, and surveillance, if you've been on surveillance, is boring. If the bad guy doesn't move, you don't move, right? So he's just cruising the parking lot. What is he doing? He's running plates.
Oh, yeah.
Which he shouldn't have done anyways. And what does he find? Stolen vehicle. Well, now as he finds a stolen vehicle, now he needs somebody to clean it up for him.
Oh.
And so that's me in patrol, you know? And I was like, nah, that doesn't work that way. So I got upset, and I probably got more upset than I needed to. By that time, they had already diagnosed me with acute stress. And it had already been turned down by the insurance companies, and I was in the battle at that point, and I knew it was bad because I could feel the right side of my face was numbing and tingling, and I knew something was wrong. So I called my boss, and I was like, "Hey, something's wrong. I'm going to go to the ER."
This is while you're working.
I was on duty at the time, yeah. And I told him my symptoms, and he's like, "Just pull over. We'll get you an ambo." And I said, "I got lights and sirens too. If I need them, I'll just drive straight in."
That was smart.
And I didn't. Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah,
need it.
the guy with the
he's a problem solver.
Yeah, he's a problem solver.
Yeah,
Dummy.
What we
Warren's driving with one side of his face. I got this.
So I go there and I tell the charge nurse that what my symptoms are, and again the charge nurse looks at me and she gives me this clipboard and she's like, "Okay, fill this out and go sit over there with all these other people." And I'm like, "Okay," because I follow directions.
And you're in uniform.
I'm in uniform, and she gives me the clipboard.
Stupid.
Fortunately for me, their ER doctor was behind her, and he said, "Nurse, what did that officer just tell you?" And she said, "Oh, he says you can't feel his face; it's tingling." And he's like, "Bring him back." So they take me back, and they take my blood pressure. It's 195/155, and the doctor's like, "Officer, you need to calm down. You're about to stroke out." And I'm like, "I feel great. I just except for this tingling in my face and drooping, I think I'm okay." So the doctor's like, "You're not okay." Well, by this time, I had already been diagnosed with acute stress. It got pushed over to PTSD. So I was well aware of my mental state and what I was going through. And the EKG guy comes in, and he looks at me and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he's like, "You need to calm down." I said, "I'm good." And he's like, "Your charts are not good. You need to calm down." And he looks at me and he goes, "I have PTSD." And I hadn't said that to the EKG guy. The doctor knew that. And I don't know if the guy read my chart or what, but he told me that. And he's like, "Dude, this is not good." And so I remember I didn't want to call my wife and be like, "Hey," because she didn't want me to go to work in the first place.
Yeah.
So,
you were right, dear.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have gone to work.
So I started.
By the way, I'm in the ER about to die.
Yeah. So I'm in the ER, and so I call her and I'm like, "Hey, so I was minding my own business today, and now I'm in the hospital." And so she's driving. Now we live a long ways from where the hospital is because it's far east of Phoenix. But the drive, while I was waiting for them to get there, I remember thinking to myself, and it's going to sound really bad, but I'm trying to be as transparent as possible. But I was sitting on the bed, and the doctor had told me they shot me full of Ativan to bring down my blood pressure, which is an amazing drug.
Nice.
It just it was rainbows and butterflies for me. After they shot me full of that Ativan, there was no stress at that point. And I remember thinking to myself while I was sitting there, I was like, I was 40 at the time, and I thought this isn't a way that you should die at 40, right? Stroking out on the job.
As a cop, There's no glamour in that.
Right. And so I thought of Officer Down Memorial, and I'm like, that. You read those, right? There, people got shot, blown up, and there's Manny.
Yeah.
Died in the hospital of stroke because he got pissed off at a detective. And it just, and so I knew at that point my career was probably over. And I had been fighting it for the last probably about 12 months. I didn't want to give it up. And it meant something to me. And looking back, nobody ever signs up for half your tour.
No.
I was trying to get my 20 and drop and do what I was supposed to do, and the screams just, it was so much. And along with those came, the night terrors, the anger issues, the intrusive thoughts. I wasn't really suicidal.
So those are all symptoms of your diagnosis of PTSD, right?
Yeah, all those words, those big words I didn't make up myself. Those are doctor words. They're the ones that taught me about, intrusive thoughts, about the homicidal thoughts, even for people that are suicidal. I had a lot of anger. I still have a lot of anger issues.
What's your anger directed at? What is there a rhyme or reason to your anger?
No, you guys will probably laugh, but I'll tell you a story. It just recently happened like 2 days ago.
Uh-oh.
So I got up and I was going to make some over easy eggs, right? And crack the eggs, and I put first one in the pan, no problem, nice and sunny side up, and take the second one and crack it, dump it, and it breaks. And I was going to kill that fucking egg, right? How dare you?
The world was coming to
you have
an
no
end.
idea what that egg did to my world. Like, how dare you break, right? Like, I was so angry that egg broke, and it literally consumed me. I was angry, and it wasn't the egg's fault. It was probably my fault because I hit it too hard or something, or I dropped it too high, whatever. But for me, there's not really a rhyme or reason. Anger, I've wanted to, destroy my laptop because it wouldn't type the right word, and I'm the one typing.
I can relate. I want to paint a picture for the audience so that they understand. And now, when you initially had these feelings start coming up, you didn't know how to deal with them. And so that you're talking about this egg that blew your mind, Now you have the skills to kind of deal with that. How did you deal with the egg?
Yeah.
How did I deal with the egg?
Yeah, like what was the result?
How did you deal with the egg 2 days ago?
I'll tell you how I dealt with the egg. I took the spatula and I crushed the other one that was still over, and I scrambled them. Showed those eggs. Okay. Turned them right into scrambled eggs instead of over easy eggs.
You're the boss.
And what's the difference between your early diagnosis days where you didn't have the coping skills? What would you have done?
Oh, I probably would have taken that pan and thrown it across the room. Yeah. Like that would have ultimately been a righteous belief system. And I learned over time, don't believe everything I think. That's like one of the things that I learned, because some weird shit pops in your head sometimes. Like in that case, like I should probably kill these eggs right now because they broke. Like you shouldn't believe everything you think, especially if you're not in a good spot. And, I'm almost 5 years out of my issue, and I'm still struggling with these anger issues. Part of the anger issues is, my family took a big hit of that. We look for, there's no more suspects to arrest, and, they're targets. So they, I when we do our speaking engagements, I say a lot of times, my family serves a sentence for no crime committed, just because of what I've put them through, and the fear and the just straight terror that anger comes with to do that. And it takes a lot of work. You got to put in all that work and learning to deal with what's in hand, because, I think Dave and I had talked before about, some people said, well, just get over it. Right.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah.
I would love to.
And, I wouldn't do that to somebody who had a broken leg. Like you try to help them and say, okay, I know it hurts, but eventually it's going to heal. But because they can't see it, I think it doesn't seem as real. But the people who do see it are our families or our friends or our loved ones.
Or people that have already been through it. People that have been there and can understand.
Right. Because it affects everybody. I mean, the anger issue is just part of it. for the longest time, like even now, it took me a long time to tell my doctor or even my spouse, I'm afraid to go to sleep. Yeah. I'm 44 years old and I'm scared to go to sleep. You fight that urge to go to sleep because you don't know how you're going to wake up. You don't wake up in night terrors or what have you. You're hoping to be able to get, and that's where self-medication comes in. Yeah. Because you're trying to numb that pain, trying to numb it. I can tell everybody that's listening right now, the answer is not at the end of a bottle because I've looked. And I look all the time and there's no answers there. I keep trying and there's no answers. But you just the anger issues and trying to get through all that stuff. If it was up to me, I'd be right back in the black and white doing what I was doing before. Yeah. I didn't want to leave that job at all. And there are times, I think sometimes the anger does come from that. Right, Brian? Mm-hmm. Like you're mad because it was taken from you.
That's how I felt when I had to retire. I felt like this wasn't my decision, and because of the circumstances that happened to me, I lost my career, and it made me mad.
Yeah, and I mean, there's times you wake up and you're not. That identity factor is a big thing. Trying to wake up and you're not needed. I remember when I first retired, man. It seemed like every day was 14-30 hours. I should have been in briefing.
Yeah.
No one. I wasn't needed anywhere.
You were replaced. You were easily easily replaced.
And again, this goes to what I was telling you about. Don't believe everything you think, because in my mind, me not being there meant the beat shut down.
Oh yeah, right? Like, they couldn't function without you.
Well, how are those criminals gonna go to jail if I'm not there?
I don't know how it worked without you.
And now they replace them with. It took 5 millennials to replace me. And so and then I mean, along that time frame, a lot of things happened. I got on medication, and we can talk about that another time on how the meds worked and what did work or didn't work. Ultimately had to, I got a service dog, which was a whole nother set of anger issues, she helped me quite a bit, but, trying to process all of that stuff. Like one day I was taking her to get groomed, and they encourage you, bathe your dog. I'm not an animal lover. I'm not going to hurt a dog or anything like that, but I'm not going to hug my dog and tell it goodbye at the end of the,
Jerk.
Yeah. So I have to take it to go get groomed, but I have to bathe it, so I take her down to a local place to give her a bath and get her all smelly good. And this 19-year-old millennial sees me walk in, and she's got her vest on, and she's like, "Oh, is that your dog?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh, it's a service dog, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Lucky?" And I'm like, no Lucky? What does that mean? Right? And I must have looked like angry, but she looked at me and I could almost see the fear in her face, because I'm like, no, I don't want this dumb dog walking next to me everywhere I go.
That's a stupid response of hers. Lucky.
Yeah.
Oh, Lucky. She obviously was a dog lover.
She
wanted
was
to take her.
She works at a grooming place.
Her little dog with her all over. But
so that was another fiasco, and then training with her was another one. And then taking her out in public, her vest says service dog on 2 sides. It has my gang patch on it. It says ask to pet.
Yeah. People, that means do not touch.
Right. So, I get, people, everybody, oh my God, look at your dog. And I was like, hey, PTSD does not stand for pet the service dog. Back the fuck up. Because I was getting angry because everybody, and then what it would do is it would spin her up. Right. And then I'd get spun up because I couldn't control her, and we're still in training. And so everything was just a lot.
None of that sounds fun to me.
So you got a service dog to try and help your anger, and it was causing you more anger.
Well, the service dog wasn't to calm me. The service dog was so that I could go out and not kill somebody, because you got to remember. Well, I shouldn't say you have to. I guess I can explain it to people that don't understand. But you go to the store with your spouse, and they're walking on eggshells because they don't know what the hell you're going to do. So they can't shop correctly because you're going to blow up, or you're not paying attention, or you're spiraling out of control. People got too close to you. So I think our spouses are a good read of our faces. And the dog isn't, I don't want to say necessarily better, but it's just a lot faster. And with my dog, I could go to the store by myself. You give my wife a break. I could go to the store by myself and then people, surprisingly enough, people stay away from the dog until they realize it's friendly. But I could pick stuff off the shelf and not worry about somebody coming up behind me. That's her namesake, Six. So I had trained her to watch my back when I was grabbing stuff, because you know how grocery stores are. You know, people aren't paying attention. They're looking at their list, or they're FaceTiming somebody and they run into you, or you know, some kids running around or they pop a balloon and now you're fried. So, and then she was taught to block, and she's also taught to go get my wife if I had a panic attack. But trying to get into the rhythm of that is hard, because you're trying to live a life that you're not used to. Yeah. You know, I had a lot of confidence. I think we all do as cops. We have confidence. Walk into a room. If you worked undercover, you could walk into a room and run those people all day long. You own that room. Yeah. But my confidence level was gone.
Confidence. That's something that happened with me too. I was confident. I kicked doors by myself. I have no problem going into a room and regulate and do whatever. And then all of a sudden, I fucking can't even go outside. Like, I have no idea what's the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do. So I got to just stay inside. Mm-hmm. I got to stay home. I can't be out doing anything. So that's interesting, because I don't think you've ever said that your confidence was shot. But
confidence is a big deal. I mean, just trying to, I think, and Dave talked about it on his a little bit when he talked about his confidence. His is a little different, because you get in a shooting and things fall. They fail. People get killed, unfortunately. Mine wasn't like that, but you know, I struggled a lot with the fact that my career was taken by a non-violent issue. Right. And then you're trying to articulate to people what you're doing, and then when people have this misconception of you can just get over it, you know, trust me, if I could shut it off, I shut it off. I go right back to the uniform. As much as I don't want to feel that uniform or this, and it's 5 years from when I retired. And I'm looking at these officers, and they're just getting burned on both, from both ends. Yeah. They're asked to do much more with less officers on the street. They're getting called to a lot more violent acts. They're getting their anxiety has to be out the wall, because any day now, I mean, a shooting can take place. And SWAT, those guys came in after the fact. Think about that. Patrol now is SWAT. Patrol is who responds to these active shooters. Yeah.
Because there's no time for SWAT.
Yeah, unless they're on the SWAT team in patrol. But, it's all over by the time those dudes get there.
There's one thing that you skimmed over that I want to talk about was suicide. So you said you weren't suicidal ever?
No.
You never thought about suicide?
No, not
Brian?
Ever.
Brian, were you...
Well... Yes,
There's no doctors here, motherfuckers, so tell the truth.
So I've had suicidal thoughts, and it's on the spectrum. So there's suicidal ideation is where you think I'd be better off, or everyone around me would be better off if I wasn't here. Right. It's like you make a justification for why you don't belong. And then I've also had suicidal thoughts, like I should just end it right now. So I've had a whole spectrum of it, which I don't believe in it, and that's why I'm still here today, is because I don't believe in that. But I've had the thoughts, and I've had the desires, and I've had the means, but I've never done it. And those were things that it was hard for me, because, as a cop, I would run into suicidal people all the time, and I'm like, what's wrong with you? Why would you want to hurt yourself? Yeah. I never understood why someone would feel that way. Well, after going through all the traumatic events at work, seeing other people's lives torn apart and being part of that. And, I got to a point where I got diagnosed with PTSD, and the overwhelming anxiety, the fear, the anger, depression, all those things just overwhelming me all day, every day, being overwhelmed by noises like you talked about. I could go into a movie theater and I could hear every person in there chewing their popcorn, and it just drove me up the wall. And so you have all these emotions just overwhelming you, and all you want to do is to shut it off. Yeah. Whether that's through medication or suicide. Yeah. You just want that to go away. Yeah. And for me, it got to a point where I'd been to counseling. I've tried medication. I was doing everything they told me. When's it going to stop? When am I going to get the fix? When
is all the noise going to stop?
When's it going to go away? You know, because you get a cold, you take some medication, some vitamin C, and it goes away.
Right.
That hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
You know, when's this going to go away? So my actual suicidal thoughts happened on medication. There was a certain medication that did not. That was one of the side effects.
Well, so I think a lot of those medications give suicidal thoughts.
And that scared the hell out of me. When I started having those feelings and those thoughts, I wasn't ready for it. I'm like, whoa, where'd that come from? I don't want to kill myself. But then I was like, well, hell yeah, I do. I want to hurt myself right now. I don't want to be here. This is overwhelming. I don't want to feel these feelings. I
turned everything internal. Okay, so I was a very outgoing person, but once my confidence was shot, I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't do anything, and everything was so overwhelming that I thought at some point, okay, it would be easier if I wasn't here, because not for anybody else, because that was, I didn't give a shit about anyone else. But did I ever tell a doctor that? Fuck no. Mm-mm. Because I can't tell a doctor that, because what's the first thing they're going to do?
They're going to commit you.
They're going to commit me. They're going to take my gun away. And then I definitely have no job, because now I'm fucking crazy and I'm danger to
not
myself.
Trustworthy.
Like fucking ever, So I wasn't able to tell anyone that. So I'm having all these internal thoughts of, fuck, I just need it to end. And this is the only way that I know that it's going to end.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think mine, I didn't have suicidal thoughts, but I was reckless. So a lot of things, like when I did go back to work prior to being retired, like I would call people off my backup with guys with guns, right? And I'm like, oh, we're going to have a showdown. Either he's going to beat me or I'm going to beat him. And I think a lot of that was anger, and I would tell the doctors, like my thought process was, who's going to fix me? And then when you can, I'll just kill you, move on. Because I couldn't grasp. And people have asked, how did you not think about it? If you're hearing these screams, you could just off yourself and be better. Yeah. And my response was, I like me. Why am I going to hurt me? Like Brian said, you guys are the fuckheads, not me. And it was basically turned, instead of internalizing like you did, I just externalized it to everyone else. And then they became targets.
Well, I think that part of it was shame. I was so ashamed of myself for having a reaction to something that I felt I shouldn't have had a reaction to.
Yeah.
So, I was ashamed, and I thought that's how I fix it.
Yeah.
Is that I make my shame go away, and then everyone will be fine, because I'm the problem. What I'm hearing is the problem, and not being able to function was the problem.
Yeah, and
so your suicidal thoughts or ideations that you were feeling were based on shame?
Partly, I think it was part shame, because I was ashamed. I was ashamed of myself in front of officers. Like, I would just have a meltdown because I didn't want the other officers to realize that there was something wrong with me over a call that I didn't get shot. I wasn't shot. I didn't have any physical injuries, and I didn't understand. So I was ashamed of myself. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I think because we think that the people see the way we feel. Does that make sense? Like no. So when I stepped out, I felt like a weak soup sandwich.
Weak, yes.
Right? And
yes.
Weak and not so that's what I thought people saw me as. But they weren't seeing that. They were still seeing the same Manny, but in my mind, they were seeing what I was in my head. You know what I mean?
No, that makes complete sense, because I know they saw me one way. Well, I know I saw myself tough. I'm a big girl, so yeah. And I have kicked doors by myself, so I know I have no problems with that. But now, after this, I'm like, I could do nothing. I couldn't fucking go anywhere. I couldn't go to the grocery store. I couldn't, I sat on the couch in front of a TV that I never even listened to. I never heard, because I was in my own head.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. I mean, that happened when I retired. I sat in a chair waiting to die. I remember thinking that average life expectancy is 80 and I was 40. Ugh. I'm not going to sit here for 40 years listening to this screaming. And you would think it stands a reason to think just off yourself, but it never crossed my mind. I was so angry. I was just looking for targets, man. You know, and if I went out and somebody looked at me the wrong way or did something the wrong way, we were going to have issues.
Well, I know, but take back to, okay, I don't even know where I was going with this thought, but you didn't want to die as a police officer having a stroke.
Right.
But if you can go out there and get in a gunfight, then that's okay, because that's cool.
Yeah, it's more honorable.
It's more honorable, right? I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even in my mind, I think it would have felt better. In some regards, I thought maybe that if you got in a shooting or you smoked a dude or whatever, the screams would stop. And again, that goes back to what I was saying. Like, you shouldn't believe everything you think,
right?
Especially in our situation, because some of the things you think, like, I mean, that's part of what I use Six for. You know, I don't use her as much going out anymore, but even at the house, you know, there were times I couldn't be in the house by myself. I have a panic attack. Think somebody was coming to get me. Somebody's coming through the door. And it was funny because if she's not moving, there's nobody outside.
Right.
You know, but in my mind, there's like an army outside, you know. I'm peeking out the window like, who the fuck's standing out here? You know, who's that car? You know, my dumbass dog snoring, you know, I guess you're not scared, so what should I be scared? And so even now, like when I go to bed, she goes right to the door on the other side of the door. She's not on the inside of the door. She's on the outside of the door. Yeah. And she puts her body up against that door. And even just that gives me the ability to come down and sleep normal because I know she's going to alert. But It took a long time to get to that point. You know, I'm 5 years out and I'm just now off my sleep meds. And I still have night terrors sometimes. But you, like Brian said, you learn to go back to what we learned before. Like, we were self-soothers. We had coping skills. So you have to go back to that. But it's not, and Dave and I have said...
So you're saying we had skills as police officers to cope?
No, I think as our...
compartmentalizing. What's the other words?
Dissociate.
Dissociation.
Yeah, check out.
Those are very healthy words.
Well,
That's why I can't remember shit.
Well, they don't know. No one knows... We did it. We all did it, but we didn't know what it was.
Well, I think as a type A personality, like most cops are, we can do the job and move on. I mean, we could do a podcast on shit that should have fucked you up that didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but why didn't it? Well, it just wasn't that call. Yeah. I mean, that was one of the things that I argued with my doctor about. I had a lot of questions. You know, why? Why this? I mean, I could rattle off a whole shit ton of calls that should have messed me up that didn't.
Yeah.
You know, body parts in a tree or... You know, a baby had been tossed against the wall. Like, you think to yourself, that should have messed me up, and it didn't.
Yeah.
You glaze over those things, and I think maybe when the doctors are on, we can ask them. But I think we put that stuff out of sight, out of mind, kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
And maybe that comes crashing down in the end, like you guys, Brian and Dave, say about tossing that shit in the back of the bed.
Well, it's also like we talk about incident envy. You know, how you think that something else would be the one that takes you out, you know, and you don't think about what really takes you out, you know. But one thing you keep talking about night terrors. What for you is night terrors? What did that mean, or what is it? What did it look like for you?
Before I was on meds, and even when I was on meds, when they were adjusting the meds, they would put you out. When you get put out, you know, I hear screams, so that's how I would wake up, with those screams. But it would be in the version of the most ghoulish, outlandish thing you could hear or see. Right, somebody's at the window and they're screaming out there, and you're in sheer terror.
You're trapped in a dream where people are screaming, and
it's not that they're screaming. It's just that there's so many things that come flooding in with that. Waking up, you know, I wake up times and I don't know where I'm at. You know, I'm reaching for a gun.
Oh yeah.
And it's not because I wouldn't say that it's not because I pulled my gun a lot or I was used to that. I think it's self-preservation. I'm trying to save somebody's coming to get me.
Somebody's coming to get me.
You know what I mean? Like, somebody's coming through those doors. Yep. I don't know who it is, but it's definitely not a normal bad guy. And then you throw in whatever loop you have in your head. Like, is it a bunch of dead bodies? Like I said, there's times where I'm scared to go to sleep. Like a 10-year-old boy, like, you don't want the lights off. I don't know what I'm scared of. I just know that I don't want those screams, and I don't want to wake up and not have the ability to, you know, that whole thought process of your cup is too full because it's overflowing.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get to that point where you're comfortable, you're safe. That was a big thing for me, was safe. I mean, I'm thinking people are coming to get me, and I don't know who those people are. I don't know who they want. I mean, anybody's a threat at that point. And sometimes even early on in my worst point, before I had 6, I'd be hypervigilant looking around. I mean, even my wife says she watches my eyes dart back and forth when I get triggered. If I get triggered really bad, I can't enunciate words. Like, I can't process a thought. Like, I can't make that happen. And that
you can't talk?
No.
Holy shit.
You want to trigger me?
Let's trigger him.
I was going to say, what do we got to do to trigger this guy?
So, all right. So we're coming up on the end of the podcast. And I think we should at least say we had some feedback. So who we are, Pistol, we're in Arizona now for the time being, and hopefully getting started up in North Carolina with Dave being up that way. But that doesn't mean you can't reach out to us.
Yeah.
So you can go to our website at pistol.org. If you have questions about what we talked about in the last 2 podcasts, or if you just have questions about the organization, we're on Facebook now. I kind of got scolded because I keep putting memes up there.
And Pistol is spelled PISTLE.
Which stands for
Post-incident stress and trauma in law enforcement.
Yes.
Good call. And if you need to reach out and you want to send an email, our phone number is 480-524-9234. And, you could, even if you just want to talk, if you got a question, I mean, we get calls from people all over the world now. I mean, Australia was down here.
Yeah.
Canada.
And wives or
spouses,
significant others, right, can call in and
if
ask questions
if your
about...
significant other or somebody you know is struggling and you're not quite sure, like not wanting to get out of bed, or their demeanor's changed or their attitude's changed, those kind of things matter. And it mostly, I think, for me, just talking to the officers who are listening to this or suffering in silence, that know something's wrong and have shame or embarrassment, you can reach out. We don't ask your name. I really don't care what your name is. I don't even care what department you work for.
We want to help. We want to help other officers that are going through this. Try and figure out up from down. Really, try and help them out.
For me, I'm involved because I don't want anyone to ever have to go through the things I've been through.
Oh God,
and if there's a way for them to prevent it and get help before they fall off the wagon,
right?
That's what I call it.
Wagon.
When Manny talks about snapping, that's what I feel like, that the wheels fell off. But if you're having symptoms of stress or flashbacks, night terrors, some of the things that we've talked about on this podcast, those are all symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And, you should get help. And the earlier you get it, the better off you'll be.
Right.
And,
we've had officers that have gotten it pretty quick and they're back on duty. So
yeah.
It doesn't start as PTSD. It starts as acute stress. So reach out. One of the other, there's 2 other things, and we're none of us are paid in Pistol. It's all volunteer. And we refer out, talk about things that we've experienced. So we're not getting paid to endorse anyone or any specific doctor. But West Coast Post-Trauma Retreat is one of the things that have helped some of the officers. You can look them up online. And the other thing is Cop Line. It's a suicide hotline for cops. That number is 800-267-5463.
And if anybody wants to donate to Pistol, we use that to help officers to pay for their doctors and get people help.
Go to treatment programs.
Right. And we have talked about starting a scholarship fund for Carlos Ledesma in his name. So that would also be part of it. So if you do, let us know. And if you have any questions or you want to ask a question or you want it brought up on a podcast, just send us an email or hit us up on Facebook. I think, what are you supposed to like, share, and comment, or share and comment or something?
Well, we really want your feedback. This is all new to us, and the reason we're doing it is because we want to help. We want to get the word out, and that's what's important to us. So if you have feedback, please give it to us. If it's not on social media, it can be in an email, like Manny said. But we really want feedback, and if you want a specific topic for us to talk about, let us know. We have an arsenal of topics that
Oh my God.
that we're going to get to.
You have no idea the arsenal that we have.
But if you have something specific that you'd really like to hear about, or how we dealt with it, or if we're dealing with it, please let us know. We'd love to talk about it, and we plan on talking about a lot of things. And a lot of the reasons we share our traumatic incidents is because we want you to understand where we're coming from and how we got where we're at, and some of the things that got us where we're at, and unfortunate that's where we're at.
The website's pistle.org, pistle.org.
Thanks for listening.
All right, we'll see you on the next one then. Yeah.